It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to this Sky News special programme live from Dover. During the next 60 minutes, we'll have reaction and analysis after the deaths of at least 4 people trying to cross the English Channel on a small inflatable boat. More than 40 people survived the ordeal, dragged to safety in freezing conditions. One fisherman telling Sky News his vessel was surrounded by people screaming for help.
It's not a boat to cross the channel in. There's too much in the boat, 45 people in one dinghy. I'm not surprised that the bottom of the dinghy collapsed. There's too much people in it.
Rescue teams were quick to respond. The British and French navies, Coast Guard helicopters and lifeboats all involved in the search for survivors.
I'm in Ashford at a hospital that treated some of those who were. Emergency departments across Kent were told to expect multiple casualties.
The government says it wants migrants to take safe, legal routes to get to the UK, but for some people that seems impossible. Today, here in France, we've met people determined to get to Britain any way they can.
Also ahead, we'll hear from one man who survived a previous crossing, who says it was the cruel channel that killed the victims today. And the huge increase in people risking the crossing and the resources needed when they get into trouble. Hello there and good evening from Dover. It is another deadly reminder of the risks people are willing to run to enter the United Kingdom. At least 4 people dead and 43 more rescued, attempting to make the dangerous journey across the Channel in a small inflatable boat. One migrant who managed to get to Britain last year told us that the Channel was cruel and that every second those crossing it feel like they are at risk. Well, tonight we'll hear from our correspondent in France, where the small boat set off, and in Ashford, where one person lost their life following the ordeal. But first, let's take a look at how it all unfolded. Well, the incident happened around halfway between the Kent coast and the coast of France. Sky News understands the boat set off from Ambleteuse Beach, just southwest of Calais. The alarm was raised just after 3 o'clock this morning. 2 search and rescue helicopters, plus a French Navy helicopter, RNLI lifeboats and other UK and French Navy boats were all involved in the rescue. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has tonight's first report on this morning's rescue operation, and a warning, it does include pictures of the dead body of one of the victims.
A death trap in the English Channel. The dinghy bottom has collapsed. The people inside are immersed in freezing water, their lives in the balance. Salvation is a 100-foot scallop boat called Arc Taurus. Every face is focused on the rope that could save them, if they can just reach it. Photos capture the horror. People up to their necks in water. The man in blue at the back barely hanging on. Some had leapt away from the dinghy, screaming for help. You can see in the bottom right corner of this shot 2 people, hardly able to keep their heads above water. A fisherman, Raymond, was among those rescuing the migrants, and he spoke exclusively to us from his boat on the phone.
The sea conditions was good. It was the sea was calm. It was very still. It was very heavy. All these people in the water screaming. They didn't feel real. It was just bodies everywhere, all around the boat. 5, 6 people each side. They were all trying to get aboard the boat, handing out my fishing gear, and telling my crew, "Don't let me go, please help."
The Royal Navy, French Navy, Coast Guard and RNLI lifeboats helped in ensuring the last survivors were plucked from the sea, guided by helicopter spotlights above. It's rare that a rescue is documented in this detail, and the grim reality is also captured by the fisherman's camera, showing that not everyone made it. This man had attached himself to the side of Raymond's boat, out of sight, until it was too late. You can almost feel the ice-cold temperatures of just 1 degree Celsius just looking at the images of those who made it on board.
Put them below deck, and then they took off their clothes, got all the wet clothes off, and put them into a lukewarm shower to try and slowly increase the body heat slowly. If you do it too quickly, it could be a heart attack.
After Raymond and his crew had pulled the people out of the water and given them a warm shower and warm clothes, they realised they had 31 people on board. And what's clear now is that if Ray's boat hadn't been in the right place at the right time, many, if not all of those people, would have died in the water.
It's not a boat you cross the channel in. I'm not surprised that the dinghy collapsed. There was too much people in it.
But those warnings and these images don't seem to deter. Nearly 45,000 people have crossed the channel this year, and many more will try. Jason Farrell, Sky News, Dover.
Well, our national correspondent Tom Parminter is here with me now in Dover. Tom, just watching that footage, it's harrowing and it's terrifying, isn't it? You know, you wouldn't last long in the water in these sort of temperatures. Is there still a search operation underway?
Well, of course, we have to say that it's expected potentially that there could be further victims, because there is never a list on these boats of people who were on board, and they have to go by the accounts that people can give them who were rescued. It was a great slice of fortune. The one slither of good luck in all this was that that fishing vessel was so close to be able to pick up the people who were in the water. And as you say, bitingly cold again here tonight, as it was yesterday. And the search and recovery operation, as it will be now, is purely just trying to establish whether or not there was anyone else in the water. Finding them alive now is simply not going to happen. It is yet another dreadful example of the risks that people are prepared to take, of course facilitated by these gangs of criminals operating on the coast of northern France. Up to £5,000 those people had paid for a space in that overcrowded boat. And of course it comes one day after Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, outlined his vision to get a grip on this crisis that we've just seen escalating over the last couple of years. More and more people, but these incidents do not deter them. The efforts of the British and the French governments do not deter them. And this bitingly cold weather here tonight that we've seen this week does not deter them. There will be other people on the northern coast of France tonight expecting to hand over their money and take their chances yet again.
Yeah, incredible. Tom, I know you're going to stick around. We'll speak to you a bit later on in the programme. But let's cross over to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, on the other side of the channel. He's in Sangatte. And Adam, just listening to what Tom was saying there, it seems incredible, doesn't it, given what has happened today, that tonight there will be people where you are considering making this very same journey?
Absolutely. I mean, Sangatte is a name that is synonymous with these sort of crossings. I can't imagine how many of these small boats have set off from the beach behind me to try to get to Britain. It is temptingly close. When you stand here on a clear day, you can see over to the White Cliffs. But of course, that forgets the fact that that English Channel is the busiest shipping lane in the world. It is inky dark in the water around there. There are large ships passing, and it is freezing cold at this time of year. If you thought about this logically, you wouldn't do it. But everybody who is here, every migrant who comes to this corner of France comes here for only one reason, and that is to try to get over to Britain. And the vast majority are trying to do so in these dinghies and these small boats. A year ago, almost to the day, I was here after it turned out 31 people had died in making one of these journeys. And at the time, there was so much political rhetoric talking about action that had to be taken. And action has been talked about, but we haven't seen much in the way of concrete movement. Instead, we've seen rising numbers and tonight more deaths as this continuing tide of small boat crossings. These migrant camps are the last stop for people planning to get to Britain. The deals are done here between people smugglers who have boats and migrants willing to pay thousands of pounds for a place on board an overloaded dinghy. We met these men, Indians from Punjab. Last night they were also out in the Channel. their boat started sinking 5 kilometres from the French coast. You went back to France. You came to the beach again on your boat.
Yes, beach again beach, then jump and swimming, then
Swimming?
yeah, very cold water.
Wow. You had to swim
Yeah,
back to the beach.
yeah.
You are lucky to be alive.
I killed last night.
You think you died.
Right, yeah.
You are lucky that you are
Yes,
here.
Yeah.
It is a complex problem. Look at this. Last month, we filmed migrants running past French police and clambering into boats held offshore by people smugglers. The French officers are under orders not to enter the water. So if you get past them, then they can't stop you. And this year, a record number of migrants have taken to small boats. The Channel today was deadly cold. What's remarkable is not that people died here, but that sent off in flimsy dinghies, more people haven't perished in these waters before. Both the French and British say they will do more to combat this sort of cross-channel migration. Well, this rescue and recovery operation started in the small hours and it's been going on all day ever since. It involves both British and French resources. Now, this French boat has only just been assigned to work full-time here in the English Channel, a sign of a greater focus by France on cross-channel migration. While we were out, another sign of the heightened tension.
North Cardinal. To keep a sharp lookout for persons in the water. Dover Coast Guard coordinating.
The British Coast Guard issuing an alert after reports of more people in the water. But so far, nothing has stemmed the tide. More people arrive or try to cross despite the peril. More deaths feel inevitable. I'm sure that what we will see now is an uptick in the political rhetoric and that people will once again say something has to be done. The trouble is, it's hard to know what is going to be done. This is an enormously complex question. It's not simply about stopping people getting across that water. It's about questioning why they're trying to make that journey anyway. How can you prevent them? How can you scrutinise them? How can you act within international law? An example of that very clearly is the British government talks about illegal migration. The United Nations insists that it cannot be illegal to claim asylum, and that if a person chooses to claim asylum in Britain, then that is their right. The British government responds by saying, well, they should be taking a legal route, and others will say, unless you come from Afghanistan or Syria or Hong Kong or Ukraine, it's almost impossible to get into Britain to claim asylum legally. And it is this Gordian knot of questions that has to be somehow unpicked. Yes, there's been an increase in funding for the French police. Yes, there has certainly been an upsurge in political rhetoric on both sides of the Channel. But have we seen any concrete action to stop these sort of accidents? Frankly, I think the answer to that is no.
Well, a number of those who were on the boat in the early hours of this morning have been treated in hospitals in Kent. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury is at the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford. Sadia, have you had an update on their condition?
Yes, well, 2 of the people that were rescued were brought to this hospital in Ashford. That's about a 40-minute drive from Dungeness on the south coast, much quicker, of course, by air ambulance. Now, this morning, East Kent Hospitals was put on standby, so emergency departments across Kent were told to expect multiple casualties, and they remained on standby until about 9 this morning. And in that time, 2 of those people that were rescued were brought to William Harvey Hospital here in Ashford. And this afternoon, the hospital confirmed to Sky Sky News that sadly one of them had died. They are included in the overall 4 people to have lost their lives during this incident. And the other patient was treated here. And as of around 4:30 this afternoon, which is when the hospital last updated us, that person was due to be discharged today. Now, we don't know their identities. We don't know if they're men or women or adults or children, because, of course, the next of kin have to be informed. And that in itself is a difficult task to undergo, because a lot of these people that come from France to the UK on these small boats often do so without any official documentation, so no passports or birth certificates. And many of them don't speak English or speak very little English, so it's very difficult for them to communicate with medics and those refugee support workers. Tonight, there's a warning from the British Red Cross's Director of Refugee Support Work, Alex Fraser, who says that the fact that people take this journey in these temperatures shows how desperate they are, and that people don't risk their lives like this unless they have run out of all options. And he said that unless there are more accessible and safe routes to claim asylum in the UK, he warned that there is a danger we will continue to see incidents like this in the future.
And Adam in Sangatte in northern France, thank you both for now. Well, residents and charities here in Kent are well used, of course, to dealing with migrants arriving from France. Today, they are faced with another journey that ended in tragedy. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, expressed her profound sadness and called the incident a sobering reminder of why the government has to end these crossings. Our Communities correspondent Lisa Holland reports now on the UK's response to the crisis.
Ali is an asylum seeker from Iran who crossed the Channel on a small boat last year. He says it was a terrifying experience.
Every second, every moment, we are expecting a bad happening, a bad incident, because you are like a small point, small dot at the middle of nowhere, with all of big ferries, big cargo ships and stuff. So we were so scared.
When you heard the news, what had happened to the people on the Channel, what went through your mind?
They have lots of hopes, lots of plans for the rest of their life, and the cruel Channel killed them.
It's not the first time Ali is mourning the deaths of fellow asylum seekers. He was friends with 5 members of the Kurdish-Iranian Nejad family who perished in the Channel 2 years ago.
The mother of family sent me a voice message and told me all of the smugglers are so bad people, and they are thinking about money, only money, not humanity.
The government is clear about who's to blame.
Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
But campaigners say boat crossings are being driven by the lack of safe and legal routes for genuine asylum seekers to reach the UK.
It is simply not possible in most circumstances for someone fleeing persecution or a war-torn country to wait for a fictitious scheme which may or may not come in time to sometimes save their lives or the lives of their families or loved ones. It is not a compassionate approach.
Those who've made it to the UK say people understand how dangerous the journey is, but it won't stop them from crossing. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's in Westminster for us this evening. And John, there's a terrible irony, isn't there, here, that yesterday the Prime Minister was outlining his plan to deal with this problem, and yet today we see another tragedy.
Yes, and the statement made by the PM yesterday was referred to several times by Suella Braverman today. His 5 point plan. Mr Sunak began Prime Minister's questions today by talking about his sorrow at what had happened overnight, and that was echoed by other party leaders, Sir Keir Starmer and Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats, for example. But it's only a few weeks since Suella Braverman was talking about an invasion on the south coast. Comments that earned her a rebuke from the Archbishop of Canterbury, no less. Her tone today was much more measured. There was quite a sombre tone throughout all the exchanges in the House of Commons. I mean, she, for example, was saying these are the days that we dread. And she referred also to the fact that around about a year ago, 27 people on one day lost their lives. It's a sobering reminder of why we have to end these crossings, she said. Now, in response to that, there was, for example, claims by one Tory MP from Kent, that's Craig McKinley, a Groundhog Day, he said. And yet Roger Gale, Sir Roger Gale, another Thanet MP, on Sky News was talking about the government playing to the right-wing gallery and accused them of a lack of compassion. Now, there was also, towards the end of the exchanges, Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, was talking about holding out the hand of humanity and friendship to very desperate people. And that earned him a rebuke from Suella Braverman when she said, we need a reality check here. The reality is not everybody getting on a small boat or unseaworthy vessel is a refugee. Not everyone coming here illegally is here on humanitarian grounds. They're economic migrants coming illegally, she said. Now, also highly significantly, immediately after Suella Braverman's statement and all the questions, a Tory MP, Jonathan Gullis, moved a bill, Asylum Seekers Removal to Safe Countries Bill. Now, a private member's bill, the aim being to send the asylum seekers off to Rwanda, as the government has talked about, and ignore any legal rulings that might come from either courts here or in Europe. That failed by 188 votes to 69, but highly significantly, 69 right-wing Tories backed that, enough to defeat the Rishi Sunak, a big rebellion, if that were to come to a big vote in the Commons. So, more evidence that the Prime Minister is under huge pressure from the right wing of his party to tackle this issue. And that's perhaps why we've heard so much in the last 24 hours. And although today's statement by the Home Secretary obviously followed the tragedy overnight.
John, many thanks. Well, let's stay in Westminster, shall we? We're joined now by David Simmons, chair of the all-party parliamentary group on migration. Thank you for your time this evening. Interesting hearing John Craig there talk about that boat that sank almost a year ago, 27 people perishing in the Channel. Why has nothing happened since then?
Well, clearly, a lot has happened since then. I mean, the government have made some statements about the very large numbers of people who have been resettled to the UK from places like Hong Kong, Afghanistan, Syria, by safe and legal routes. And I was very pleased to hear that the Home Secretary has been working very actively with the authorities in the EU, in France, in Belgium, other countries that were involved, on getting in place some fixes. But I think the strength of feeling that's been expressed in the last couple of days demonstrates that it's not about any particular political party or any wing of any political party. Everyone wants to find a way to stop this from happening. We want to make sure that people have access to safe and legal routes who have a genuine and legitimate claim to asylum and refuge in the United Kingdom, and that we have a more effective way of deterring people who don't have such a genuine claim from putting their lives at risk.
You mentioned safe and legal routes there, Ukraine, some from Syria, Afghanistan, etc. But there are many countries around the world where people are struggling, where they do need to flee tyranny, and there isn't a safe route for them. Why is it taking so long for that to happen?
Well, this is exactly the point that I raised during the debate and in questions earlier on today. We need to ensure that people who, for example, are in northern France, who have family members in the UK, perhaps parents, close relations, who would have a genuine claim, and we know that for those who come from Iran, for example, around 98% will have their asylum claim in the UK approved, have a means to make that application in Britain safely. At the moment, you cannot apply for asylum in Britain unless you are physically here, and that's why people are putting their lives in the hands of the people smugglers. So we need to change that situation. We need a means for people to make that application so we can consider it properly in the UK and give them permission to travel here if they have a good claim, at the same time as breaking the business model of the people smugglers, which depends entirely on the absence of any safe route by which people could come to the UK who have a genuine claim.
The Prime Minister made his announcement yesterday. Do you feel that what he had to say goes far enough? Many people say that they don't think those ideas were bold enough.
It's a huge step in the right direction. I think we made more progress in that statement than we have, certainly in the last few years, in addressing the issue and prioritising people who come to the UK from countries that we know are safe, like Albania, which has been on the UK Home Office's safe list for more than a decade, will go a long way towards dealing with the backlog of asylum applications and making sure that genuine asylum seekers get their rightful place towards the head of the queue. But clearly we need to go further, and the work that the Home Secretary is doing in particular with the French authorities is the thing that will really begin to fix this. And the next step needs to be looking at what is the means by which people who have a genuine claim can make that claim safely without having to put their lives in the hands of the people smugglers. That is the thing that will crack that business model and make sure that the UK has the kind of asylum system that we all want to see.
Is focusing on more deterrence, though, the right way to go about this? Because surely that will push people to more and more desperate measures to cross over from France. For example, we managed to stop people largely coming on lorries. That was successful. But what they now do is come on boats, which is even more dangerous.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. Deterrence is a part of this, but that's about people knowing that in the UK we have an asylum system which is robust, is safe, and that if they have a genuine claim, then they'll be treated favourably. If they don't have a genuine claim, then they can expect to be returned to their country of origin or to another safe country. So policies like the Rwanda policy announced last year will be a small part of that, but it's absolutely clear under our laws, if people have a legitimate claim in this country, they need to be able to come and make it safely. And if they don't, they need to be dealt with by robust border controls. And it's getting that balance right is the thing that will make sure we don't see any more people losing their lives in the Channel in this awful way.
Why do people want to come here? Why do they want to risk their lives crossing the Channel when they may well travel through plenty of other safe countries that they could claim asylum in?
Well, many of the people who are coming across the Channel are doing so because they have connections to the UK, typically family members who are already here. They might have a husband, a wife, they might have parents or children who are already in the United Kingdom and they want to join them. And that's one of the reasons why they would have a well-founded claim to come to the UK. The European Union has a policy called the Dublin Treaty, which means that you're required inside the EU to make your asylum claim in the first safe country. And that means many of the people, and I met a lot of them personally in Calais earlier in the year, are not able to claim asylum in France or anywhere else in the European Union, and therefore the United Kingdom is the only country that remains that they can go to. But we need to recognise the UK is not a particularly popular destination for asylum seekers. More than double the numbers go to France, more than 3 times the numbers go to Germany. It tends to be those people who have a connection to Britain that want to come here, and we need to recognise that in the way that our asylum system operates.
This country, of course, as you well know, has a very proud history of opening its arms to people who are in need, whether it's those suffering in Ukraine at the moment or you go back to World War II, even beyond that. Do you think this government is being compassionate enough?
My constituency is home to generations of people who've come to the UK and found sanctuary as refugees. And I think the fact that we resettle very large numbers of people from countries across the world that were real trouble spots demonstrates that we're willing to do that. This is an issue about making sure that people who are not part of resettlement schemes from places like Syria, Ukraine or Afghanistan, but who are choosing to come to the UK because they have a connection here, have a safe and legal route to do so, so that we can make a proper decision in a safe way about the legitimacy of their claim. And that's why we need to have safe and legal routes in place so that the UK government can make a fair and robust decision about the validity of their claim and people are not tempted to put their lives at risk making channel crossings like this.
It needs to happen quickly, though, doesn't it? I've been coming down here for the last 5 or 6 years reporting on these boats coming across the Channel, and yet we're still in this situation. Why isn't it happening quicker?
It does need to happen quickly. And I know the international asylum system is probably under an unprecedented degree of pressure. There's more than 100 million people displaced in the world at the moment who are looking for somewhere that they can seek refuge. But clearly, we know there's been a high degree of public concern about this. We need to recognise that governments of all parties have sought to balance the needs of the country and the desire of people to seek asylum here. But in my view, given the large numbers of people who have a legitimate claim to asylum in the UK and have a direct connection here which would make them someone naturally who we would find a home for, that they have a safe and legal route by which they can do that. That, in my view, is the compassionate route, and it sits alongside the kinds of resettlement schemes where the UK has done a great deal more, in most cases, than any other country, for example, in Europe.
OK, we must leave it there. David Simmons, thank you very much, Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Migration. We appreciate your time. You're watching a Sky News special programme live from Dover. Coming up after the break, we'll be discussing in detail what can be done to prevent a repeat of today's tragic loss of life in the Channel. Hello again, welcome back to Dover, where in the early hours of this morning a huge rescue operation was launched after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the middle of the Channel. 4 people died, 43 were mercifully rescued. Several of those are said to be fighting for their lives in hospital. Well, joining me now is Sabir Zazai, chair of the Scottish Refugee Council, a refugee from Afghanistan. Also, Susan Fratsky, senior policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, and Kevin Saunders as well, former chief immigration officer for UK Border Force in Calais. Very good to see you all this evening. Thank you very much for your time on what has been a very difficult day for many people in this part of the world as they try and grapple with what is a seriously difficult problem to get to the bottom of. And Sabir, perhaps I can come to you first. What went through your mind when you woke up this morning and heard this news, given your history and personal experience?
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, it was a difficult experience for me, to be frank, because this is just that week, about 23 years ago, this week, I arrived in the back of a lorry in Dover. And I could have been one of those people. And it's sad that 23 years on, we still have a process or a route that is costing lives. Every unavoidable death is a tragedy. Our thoughts and my thoughts are with the family, friends of those who have sadly lost their lives and those that have been impacted. And I pay tribute to the rescuers who have dealt with this horrendous incident. From my own experience, I'd say no one risks their own or their family's life unless they are running from dangers more acute than those they face on these dangerous journeys.
And Sabir, I'll ask you the same question that I asked our previous guest. Why is it that they feel the need to come to this country? Why risk your life crossing this treacherous stretch of water when you could perhaps make a life for yourself in another of Europe's countries where you would be safe, you can claim asylum there? Why risk your life to get here?
There's a range of reasons. I don't want to repeat what Mr. Simmons said. I think, family is one key aspect where people have family. So if, for example, my family's life and my father's life was at risk in Afghanistan, my family is not entitled to the schemes that are provided for Afghanistan. And if they want to flee the Taliban regime, they would like to be with me. And that family support and connection is very important. We also need to acknowledge the fact that UK has got a recognition and a reputation for human rights around the world. People do see the UK as a place of safety. The other aspect is also the English language, and some people might speak English language. People don't want to just move and end up in a limbo. They want to rebuild their lives, and they want to contribute and be a positive and part of that society. So that also attracts people to come to the UK, because maybe that journey of integration is a lot more easier if you speak the language and you can rebuild your life, make a contribution, and have a dignified income and life like everyone else.
Kevin Saunders, let's turn to you. In your former role, you know this part of the world very well. You must be full of praise for those who carried out that rescue last night.
Oh, a fantastic operation by the emergency services to get out there so quickly and to deal with it, and to the fishing boat who was first on the scene and by all accounts has done a fantastic job in rescuing a large number of people. It was bitterly cold last night, and having seen the pictures, some of the people on the boat are in T-shirts and very flimsy life jackets. So the fishermen did a great job. Well done to them.
And Kevin, what do you see as the solution to this crisis? Do you feel we are working now better with the French than we have in the past?
Yes, we're working much better with the French. I mean, we always, when I was in France, we always had a very, very good relationship with the French at operational level. We worked extremely well together. We did joint exercises together. We worked very, very well. Unfortunately, the politicians perhaps didn't get on quite so well, but now they seem to have got over that. And Suella Braverman's been speaking with the French Minister of the Interior, and they seem to be getting on famously. So it looks much more promising with our political relations with the French.
Susan Fratsky, you've worked in this area for a long time, studied it extensively. When you heard what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday, he's putting this firmly on his own shoulders, sorting out this crisis. He mentioned a number of ideas, a number of proposals that he's putting forward to try and reduce the number of boats coming across. Is he going about things in the right way?
Sure. So there's two, I think, main pieces of the proposals that have been put forward. The first part is really a set of measures that are focused on enforcement, counter smuggling. And with regard to those proposals, I think smuggling is one thing, and counter smuggling and enforcement is something that it's quite easy to talk about, but hard to do in practice. This is something that policymakers and governments tend to come back to when they don't actually know what else to do. So this is a main point that's been raised, for example, in the European Union, often in trying to address the crisis in the Mediterranean. No one is really going to come to the defense of smugglers or traffickers. But the challenge is that this doesn't really address the complex drivers or motivations of people who are moving. And it doesn't necessarily address the challenges that asylum systems face in then actually dealing with the cases and situations of people who arrive. So the second set of measures that's been outlined is trying to begin to address some of these asylum pressures and address backlogs and speeding up processing, which is all very good and important and something that we really need to sort out the operations of our asylum systems. But it's really a question of how you actually do it. And it needs to be done in a way that actually maintains the credibility and integrity of the process, both in terms of the quality of decisions, asylum decisions that are actually being given to those who are arriving from a human perspective, but also from maintaining the integrity of the system perspective. If you have bad decisions, these lead to appeals and then tend to continue to create pressures on the systems. So the Prime Minister has suggested a couple of different things to address these pressures. One is scaling up staffing, which is helpful, but also it's important to keep in mind that individual people and caseworkers aren't interchangeable, and it's important to look at actually the training of who is being hired, how they're being prepared. This is really a long-term measure. And secondly, how procedures are being done. So he's proposed some changes to streamlining, simplifying procedures, dropping interviews at different places, which is incredibly important and an important tool. But again, the devil is in the details. So which cases are being sped up, which interviews are being dropped, how these are actually then affecting the individuals and their ability to make a really good faith claim for asylum. And finally, it's important to note that addressing backlogs and this huge crunch of cases that's built up through the system over years isn't just about speeding up new decisions, but figuring out how to address legacy cases. And that requires specific resources and modalities. So I think with regard to addressing the pressures on the asylum system specifically, these are important steps, but it's going to come down to, I think, a longer term gain and how all of these measures are implemented and resourced and thought through in practice.
Yeah, let's talk about that backlog with Sabir, because it is a real problem, isn't it? And you have many people here waiting for their claims to be processed, waiting many months. And just thinking about something you said earlier, that many of those who come here do want to integrate, do want to contribute, do want to start work. But of course, at the moment, they're not able to.
Yes, Jonathan, I think that's where we saw some degree of honesty from the Prime Minister yesterday. And that was the recognition of the utter maladministration of the UK's asylum system. There is a backlog of nearly 150,000 people waiting on an initial decision of their asylum claim, which impacts, obviously, hugely on people's mental health, well-being. And in his own words, as the Prime Minister said, it is unfair and appalling that we are spending 5.5 million every day on using hotels to house asylum seekers. And I think we need to be very clear on this, that this is not the fault of people seeking asylum. Other European countries manage their asylum systems with far greater numbers than the UK. The UK system has long been mismanaged. And I think, yesterday the Prime Minister failed to set out any concrete plans to expand these safe routes through resettlement programs or an expansion in family reunion visas, for example. A simple humanitarian visa would end the smuggling visas and bring safety and order instead of acute risks and disorder that we have been seeing. So the UK government, in our opinion, has yet again shown it doesn't have a workable or principled solution to address the appalling model of people smuggling and reducing dangerous channel crossings of people in search of safety. And I think, to be frank, it is disturbing that the Prime Minister is again using the issue of channel crossings with a focus not simply to seek to stop or reduce unsafe journeys, but seek to end the very principle of asylum and protection here in the UK. So I think what we are seeing is not something new. For over 20 years, successive governments have introduced hugely costly deterrence policies. They do not work.
OK. I just want to bring Kevin back in for the final word. Kevin, on a freezing cold, dark night here in Dover, we think about those people on the other side of the channel considering making this crossing. When you heard the Prime Minister yesterday talk about this small boats operational command, bringing different agencies together to try and stop the boats, do you think that will work? Is that something that is part of this solution?
It certainly is a big step forward. Having everything under one roof, so to speak, is really very helpful. So along with that, giving the NCA more money and what have you is a good idea. But can I just correct your one of your other guests? The Prime Minister actually said yesterday, as we tackle illegal migration, we will create more safe and legal routes, working with the UN Refugee Agency to identify those most in need. So we haven't slammed the door on routes at all.
OK, thank you for that point, and indeed thank you all for your contribution. We do appreciate it. Sabir Zazai, Susan Flatsky and also Kevin Saunders, thank you. Well, the number of people illegally crossing the channel is an important issue, isn't it, for many voters, and therefore a big political problem for the government, as we've been hearing. But what are the facts about how many people are making the crossing and also where they come from? Our correspondent, Tom Cheshire, has been looking at the data.
We all know by now just how dangerous the channel crossing is. Freezing conditions. As you can see here, it is incredibly busy. This is ship tracking data that shows every boat in the region at the time, around 2 in the morning. But we can show you how the rescue happened by filtering out the boats not involved. Here you see the fishing vessels at the start responding. They're joined by that lifeboat, which left at 2:40. 40 minutes later, that lifeboat is part of it. And we also see a helicopter coming out from the UK. We see other ships, a Royal Navy ship, a French Navy ship coming from France, joining that rescue effort. And more boats continue to arrive and depart, and so do more helicopters. But they're doing something different. They're not flying straight to the site. They're flying what's called a parallel track line to look for survivors, travelling up and down the area with search legs a short distance apart to look for people who may have drifted in the strong currents. The search operation continues over the next few hours. Now, today is the worst accident since the disaster in November last year when 27 people died. That came against this backdrop of increasing numbers. You can see the pressure ratcheting up 2019, 2020, 2021. But this year, it has hit a different scale. Nearly 45,000 people making that journey. The government said that people should take safe and legal routes for immigration, but I want to show you a few big numbers just to end. And 90% of those arriving in a small boat in the last year have claimed asylum. That's 31,891 people. And there's a huge backlog processing those claims. But so far, according to the Home Office, around a third of those applying have been given permission to remain. So if you apply the same rate of that holds, that would mean more than 10,000 people would be granted asylum as a result of crossing the Channel. But look at this. This is the safe and legal route. This is the statistic for the number of people who are granted refugee status through resettlement from June 2021 to June 2022. Slightly different time period, but more or less comparable. It is a whole lot smaller, 10,000 or so versus 1,600. Now, this number doesn't include region-specific schemes like Afghanistan, Ukraine and Hong Kong, which have taken thousands more but aren't open to all nationalities. And there's a difference between those two numbers, between the 10,000 and between the 1,600, which is why so many are willing to run the awful risks we see in the Channel.
Fascinating seeing the numbers there in black and white. Tom Cheshire for us. You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break, we'll get an update on the latest situation following the deaths of 4 people trying to cross the Channel earlier today.
From the very beginning of this big war, since March, myself and many other Ukrainian politicians were promoting one very simple and clear narrative. A big part of Ukrainian victory is not just defeating Russians on Ukrainian soil, but bringing into accountability everyone who committed war crimes in Ukraine. Because without justice based on international law, it's important to expect peaceful and comfortable future. For this very moment, it's not my wish. It's a joint, consolidated view of G7. Just 2 days ago, G7 spread its latest communique, and let me quote, there can be no impunity for war crimes and other atrocities. We will hold President Putin and those responsible to account in accordance with international law. So it's not my wish anymore. It's not the wish of President Zelensky or all other Ukrainians. That's the consolidated understanding of the West. But the challenge is not only to bring Russian leadership to accountability, but to bring into accountability everyone who committed war crimes. And at the moment, I can report to you that Ukrainian officials registered more than 70,000 crimes related to Russian aggression. More than 50,000 war crimes has been detected by Ukrainian law enforcement. All that require absolutely huge efforts from prosecutors, from experts, from investigators, and definitely it's a huge task for Ukrainian judiciary system and for Ukrainian judges, because it's understood for today that yes, top Russian leaders will brought into prosecution through International Tribunal Court. I hope so. I recently came back from Hague, and International Criminal Court in Hague is working extremely hard to have a good result with this. But all these thousands of war crimes definitely will be considered by Ukrainian courts. We already are doing this. The training of Ukrainian judges is extremely important because no one in this world has enough capabilities and enough experience to proceed with such a huge amount of war crimes.
Welcome back to Dover. Well, as we were hearing a little bit earlier in the programme, a fisherman whose crew saved 31 people stranded in the English Channel has told Sky News he was woken in the early hours of the morning when migrants surrounded his boat and were screaming for help. The skipper, Raymond, was speaking to our home editor, Jason Farrell.
The sea conditions was good. It was the sea was calm. It was very still. It was very eerie. It was a really eerie night for all these people in the water screaming. It was like something out of a movie. Right, they didn't feel real. And there was just bodies everywhere, all around the boat. A lot of screaming. 5, 6 people each side, port side, then the starboard side. They were all trying to get aboard the boat, handing out my fishing gear, and telling my crew, "Don't let me go, please help." But the only person we never managed to get in was one guy. It was the starboard side. We never knew he tied himself to the side of the boat. He was lying on his back, face up, and it's not nice to see. Put him below deck, and then they took off their clothes, got all the wet clothes off, and put them into a lukewarm shower to try and just slowly increase the body heat slowly. If you do it too quickly, it could be a heart attack or anything. It's not a boat you cross the channel in. There was too much in the boat, 45 people in one dinghy. I'm not surprised that the bottom of the dinghy collapsed. There was too much people in it.
That's the skipper of that fishing boat, Raymond, who I think it's fair to say is a hero. Certainly all the efforts he made to rescue those people. And when we look at that footage, Tom, it is just utterly terrifying, isn't it? People there not even wearing more than a flimsy T-shirt and that very thin life jacket, which it doesn't even fit properly. You went out on a boat here a month or so ago. What is it like out in the middle of the channel?
Well, it is something that I think you can almost become used to seeing, these dinghies going across the channel. But even if you set off in calm sea conditions on either side, obviously most normally the French side coming over to England, it can get very changeable very quickly out there in the middle. And we were out on a proper fishing vessel last month reporting on this whole migrant crossing story. And it's just the way that the sea can turn very quickly, and very suddenly you're in waves that are churning up and hitting the side of the boat and going in different directions over a metre tall quite quickly. And you put yourself in the position of being in one of those inflatable boats right on the water, so low down. It doesn't take much at all for that water to come on board and for panic to set in. And I think we can almost become a bit desensitised to the horrific position that people are putting themselves in.
It's an issue, isn't it, that really divides opinion. Many people here are understandably frustrated at the boats coming over continually. What do you have to say on that tonight?
Well, this is a national concern as well. It's most acute here in Kent, but across the country there are a whole spectrum of views on what this means and the sympathy levels, and really getting an answer for everyone on every side of that debate is so important, an answer that works.
Yeah. OK, Tom, thank you very much. Thank you for watching this special programme on Sky News. Coming up next, more from Dover.